As it stood, the city of Rochester, New York had a large black community with people coming north for better treatment. This influx of people is what caused the black population to grow in the city, as there was opportunity to pursue opportunities for education and career. Rochester had a reputation of being incredibly job-friendly, with an unemployment rate around 2%. However, these jobs and opportunities were not open to minorities and blacks, especially in regards to factory work. Kodak was a major employer after World War II, but it was actually considered a laughable matter among minorities that applying to places like Kodak would get your application thrown out. In short, there were jobs, but not everybody could get a job. Blacks and other minorities had to resort to manual labor jobs in order to feed their families. Rochester as a city was incredibly complacent in nature. All of the wealthier residents had lives that were well set, with jobs lined up for themselves and many generations to come. Jobs were incredibly easy to come by for the white people. Everybody was well off and nobody wanted to rock the boat. To this effect, a lot of the problems to follow were due to an our city mentality, and that the majority of the residents had their head in the sand and did not desire to change anything. This is what Kurt Gerlings called Smugtown, USA, in that the city of Rochester had a certain smugness to it. Nobody wanted to change anything because their lives were already perfect, at least for the wealthy. Additionally, in regards to housing, newcomers settled in the 3rd and 7th wards of the city, which were notoriously poor, but the only neighborhoods with public housing. Rochester was actually the last city in New York to get a public housing project, and most of the blacks lived in the 12-block radius of these two wards. Just because these boundaries were prescribed does not mean that they are any less difficult to break out of. Continuous mistreatment led a quiet rage to build up, as everybody in the community, whites and blacks alike, knew that something was wrong. There was a lot of police brutality towards blacks, with the excessive use of police dogs as a means of enforcement. Police were viewed as a force to keep blacks in place and believed that they needed to put the fear of God into people. This all came to a head on a summer night in July when, while police attempted to arrest a man for public intoxication, a police dog bit a young girl. This was, in essence, the raindrop that caused the flood, sparking a riot that lasted for 2 nights. Fire hoses were used to try to get people to leave, and shop owners' stores were looted and burned. There was a great deal of hate coming from both sides. There was anger among the black community from the way they had been continually mistreated, and retaliation from police that bordered upon unnecessary violence. The fact that this riot went on for days is cause to believe that it was not a riot at all. Rather, the events that took place in July of 1964 were a rebellion and a retaliation to the deep sense of social injustice that was being dealt with. In my own personal opinion, given the degree of mistreatment, the degree of brutality on both sides could have been smaller in scope, but it would be wrong to say that the riots were not justified, at least to some extent. At the time, Rochester as a city in general placed too much emphasis on its own image rather than the well-being of its residents, as described by Kurt Gerlings as a smugness. To this effect, the riots were a wake-up call for not only the city, but for America as a whole to bring attention to issues relating to social justice and race. Thank you.